Jonah Hill be really insecure. Welcome to the studio. We got big boy Sam Jackson and Danny Zuko watching over us. You alright, gents?
Please welcome the wickedly talented one and only Adele Dazeem.
And yeah, so this is the first video review from Stuck in the Cheap Seats. First of many. Cause for a little celebration. First video review. Hey! Got confetti on my mic. Mid90s is a indie coming-of-age drama set in 90s LA and tells the story of Stevie, a young boy with an abusive brother from a poor household, and he becomes fascinated with a skating crew, and we watch him grow and develop as an individual as he becomes integrated into this skating group. The film is the directorial debut of Jonah Hill, and while he states that the film isn't autobiographical, it's heavily influenced by his own life and passions and youth. And so it's a very cathartic film for him, I feel. While the film isn't completely based on his life, I think it's definitely a cathartic process where he comes to terms with his own identity through making this film. You can sort of chart Jonah Hill's celebrity persona pre and post mid-90s. Before, he's sort of the chubby, lovable clown, and then afterwards, after he made this film, he's like got a fresh haircut, he's wearing cool stuff, it's very thought-provoking, very zen in his personality. So I don't know what went on in his personal life while he was making this film, but I think he's definitely come to confront who he is, or who he really is, through the process of making this film, because this film is basically all about the identity of our lead character, Stevie, and how he comes to terms with who he is and masculinity in a really good way, actually. The three main themes that this film explores are beautifully summarised in the opening 2 minutes in a really great piece of economic filmmaking. We get topics of abuse, identity and masculinity all sort of shown in the film's opening 2 minutes when there isn't any dialogue at all. From this point, the film then shows his initial fascination with the skater group, and then how his relationship with them develops, and he becomes friends with them, and through his relationship developing with them, we get a really interesting exploration of power dynamics in like male friendship groups. All the men in this skater group aspire or look up to someone who's deemed better or above them in this social skating sphere. And as Stevie's friendship with this group develops, we get an exploration of the dynamics of that social structure. And like, although I don't know anything about skating, or you might not, watching it, you recognize how like there's power structures in other friendship groups that you've been in, and it sort of makes you reflect on those, and it makes it quite a relatable viewing process, because you instantly recognize, you know, someone who's looked at you like that, or you know someone who's treated you like that. There's interesting dynamics, as in what one member of the group will say is cool or hip, and then later on that will get rejected by higher members of the group. And so he's constantly struggling to improve different members of the skating community as he moves up in this friendship group. And throughout this development, there's these really nuanced but brilliant shots of different characters looking at each other, maybe spitefully or with envy, as Stevie becomes more popular, or as in certain members of the group's popularity drops and they become more of an outcast to the group. The whole social dynamic and structure of the skating group is really believable and authentic. I don't know if Jonah Hill got non-professional actors from just the streets of LA to make this film, but they act in such a way that they don't feel like they're acting. It feels really, really authentic, even to the point of being quite inane and some of the characters quite annoying. Jonah also wrote this film as well as directed it, and he's nailed like the inane conversations that like 14, 15-year-old lads have together. There's a great scene towards the start where Stevie first goes into the skate shop and we hear the skaters play Would You Rather, and it's so inane and mind-numbingly stupid and vulgar, but yet it's so close to what I think a lot of lads that age talk to. I know when I was talking to my friends at that age, we would just talk about the most ridiculous stuff, and so it comes across very authentic, although it's laughable how dumb some of the stuff they talk about in this film is. That is definitely one of the main selling points for this film, is how believable and authentic the main friendship group feels throughout the film. And so that's why the film feels very close to Jonah Hill's personal experience, because the way he's managed to capture a friendship group's dynamic feels very much drawn from life. The film's story structure as a whole feels quite familiar at times, in the fact that when I was watching it, I was like, this is reminding me a lot of This Is England, in the sense that we've got a central young character who is finding himself by becoming part of an edgy group that he's not really familiar with and he's an outsider of, and he molds himself to be a part of this group. So in that regard, it's very similar to other coming of age films, particularly This Is England. After reading up on it, I realised Jonah Hill has stated that This Is England is quite a big inspiration for him for making this film. And while it's all right for filmmakers to be inspired by other films and to then express that in their own filmmaking, a lot of aspects of the story of Mid90s feel sort of ripped from This Is England. A few cases are Stevie's relationship with his mother. Stevie's character progression as a whole's very similar to Sean in This Is England. The finales of both the films are quite similar as well, but I won't talk that much on that, so that you can watch them and enjoy them yourself. Obviously, it's two completely different settings between This Is England and Mid90s. One's just a innocent little skater crew, and the other's neo-Nazi yobheads. But it's like the structure and beats of the storyline which are very similar between the films. Another similarity between Mid90s and This Is England is the lead character will have one romantic relationship whilst he's developing within this new social group. Stevie's romantic relationship in this film feels quite odd and uncomfortable, probably because there's quite a large age gap, or an apparent large age gap, between the actors in the film. And so there's a sex scene that feels really a bit weird because Stevie's meant to be 13, and I don't know whether it's a case of poor casting, but the girl looks more like she's 17 or 16. And so feels a bit... Maybe other viewers won't find that scene as weird as I did, but I wasn't shagging any 17-year-olds when I was 13. Unfortunately. Returning to the authentic performances in the film, Lucas Hedges absolutely smashes it in this film. A lot of people are talking about Timothée Chalamet and how he's the next Leonardo DiCaprio. Nah, I'm bigging up Lucas Hedges as the next Leo. The boy does not miss with his films. Lucas Hedges has turned out stellar performances in Manchester by the Sea, 3 Billboards, Lady Bird, Waves. Timmy just did Call Me By Your Name. Stevie's relationship with Lucas Hedges, who plays his brother in this film, Ian, is one of the most interesting aspects of the film, and a really great rendition of brotherhood on screen, even though it's quite an abusive relationship. The relationship is really believable and acts as sort of like a small-scale exploration for the wider themes that happen in the film. And Lucas Hedges is brilliant as initially presenting himself as a very confident, strong bloke, and then as the film goes on, he's revealed to have one of the most fragile psyches of anyone in this film, and it's beautifully explored in 2 scenes where Hedges is just absolutely outstanding. So for those reasons, because of these really authentic performances and friendship dynamics, the film overcomes the issue of the film drawing heavily on other coming-of-age films that have come before it. Jonah Hill also clearly has a huge passion for LA at the time and clothing and the pop culture of the time and skating culture, and so it can stand on its own despite being heavily influenced by films that came out before it. There are some cliches in the story, such as what feels like quite a forced, melodramatic heart-to-heart conversation and a rather dramatic ending, but for the most part, this feels like a really close-to-life representation of what Jonah Hill felt at the time, or a coming-of-age story in LA. It, for the most part, feels extremely believable. This is obviously a huge passion project for Jonah Hill, and you can tell that in how he treats things like music, clothing, pop culture at the time. But what's great is you don't have to know anything about that cultural sphere to enjoy the film. It's just really entertaining to see a filmmaker be passionate about them, but also watch how much that culture means to the characters and how they form their identity from it is really engaging. The ending of this film is brilliant also. It's one of those films that's got a closing line that is very poignant and beautifully summarizes what the main character has gone through. The final line of this film puts his whole journey into perspective and makes a great comment on Stevie as a character and how he's developed as a character. And it puts into perspective what he's done throughout the whole film and what men do to be admired by their peers or in friendship groups. All of this culminates to make a really fantastic coming-of-age film, and while it draws quite heavily on films that have come before, how it's shot, the performances, the dialogue, and this commentary on power dynamics in friendship groups makes it a unique and memorable watching experience. I'm feeling like giving this a strong 7.3 out of 10. Not an 8, only because it is a little bit of a copycat in some aspects. Here's to you, Jonah.